problem exists that the program is trying to solve. And a specific example would be, let's say you had a program that was trying to decrease AIDS. So your needs assessment would be potentially looking to see if there was actually a problem with AIDS in the community. So your evaluative criteria would be, is there AIDS in the community? And then that's how you would know that you actually need this program. So you could set a certain amount. So 1 in 4 people have AIDS in Salt Lake City or something like that, right? Sounds about, no. It's not true. Yeah, I don't think that's true anyway. Does that make sense? So just make sure that you're really honing in on your questions and keeping simpler is better. Less is more. Don't complicate it. Okay, second question.
Oh,
or was
no,
that? This is 3. This is
1C.
1C. Okay.
So we don't answer all of them. We're picking one issue.
So the structure of this class is that you're going to go through all of these because they build on each other, right? So like needs leads to your design or your program theory. And so you're going to have to grapple with all of these questions, but for your final assignment, you're really going to have to decide on one of these, right? But you need to sort of work with the other questions because of the nature of the class, and that's just how programs.
So for our proposal, we're honing in on the one that we're trying to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I'm not looking for you guys to be like experts at this, right? Because there were groups that did a really good job, and I think the reason they did really good was they kept it really simple, and that doesn't mean it was bare or sparse. It was that they weren't overcomplicating it. They were just sticking to the questions or their main question. Okay. Another question?
Really what I'm interpreting what you're saying is these 5 questions are to first identify if there is a need.
Well, that
Yeah.
the top one is.
But then as you walk through, you're refining to see what that need really is.
So
Or what's contributing to the need.
think about it this way. So let's say you wanted to design a program. You need to first ask, is there a need for the program, right? And then the next step would be, well, how do you design that program since we know that we need one? And then after that, once it's been rolled out, then you're asking, has it been implemented effectively? And then does the program actually have the outcomes that you're looking for? Is it being run efficiently, right? So it's going through looking at it, sort of builds on each other, right? So think about it that way.
How do these questions again fit into the next slide?
So this is just showing how they build into each other. So once you know that there's a need for the program, then you're going to design it, or you're going to look at the design. And then once you've looked at the design, you're going to look at how it's being administered. So does the administration actually the design, right?
Okay, so do these steps then correlate to the big picture questions?
Yeah, so these are your big picture questions. These are like, you think about it like a pyramid, right? So at the very top you have these questions. You have these questions. And then under that you're going to have questions, like sub-questions that have to do with this. So if there's a need for the program, what sorts of questions are you going to ask? And those are your research questions that you're trying to answer. Because if you don't have research questions, then you have no direction. Because a problem is always sort of tied to a question. Does that make sense? Okay. I mean, if you feel like I graded your paper harshly, I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to like put the fear in you a little bit, but also I'm merciful. Like I'm willing to give you extra credit, and I'm not going to like kneecap you repeatedly if I notice that you're sort of adjusting and pivoting with what I'm teaching you, right?
It may be your teaching methods, but maybe sometimes for some of these pieces, an example might be useful. I don't necessarily mean for you to write out the whole thing, but to some extent, I think people might approach an assignment and say, I have no idea still what you would be looking for. And so I'm grateful that we can revise it and submit it again. But for some of the future aspects of this, maybe some simple you're looking for, and you can show us where to enhance that could be useful, especially for some of us who are like, program evaluation hasn't been a part of my work and doesn't appear to be anything that's going to happen in the near future. That may be a challenge for some people. It just seems so foreign.
I think so. What do you do again?
I work at BYU, University Relations, so it's kind of event management. So there is evaluation in my work.
But I think the sort of problem in the world we live in is that there are so many things that we do that we don't ever test or assess. So we need to, my big idea that I want to push to you guys is that even it now, or it's not a part of what you do, it should be.
Yeah.
Right? Like no matter what you're doing, you're always working with some sort of program. Even if it's just like talking to a customer every once in a while, that's still a program, right? And evaluating that is important. And there's just too many things in this world that we just do and we don't ever question, and it's terrible. Last question.
For this, I think maybe along the lines of what Clark was asking, I guess my mental model, we're going to look at the project and at the program we're going to evaluate, and maybe it's stuck at number 2 or number 3, and so we're going to try and figure that out. Yeah, we've decided there's a need for the program and it's well designed, but really hasn't been implemented, so we're going to focus on that and say, here's how we're going to crack that.
Yeah.
And we're going to be limited because we only have a certain amount of time in this. And then later on down the road, for number 5 type thing. Am I seeing that right?
Yeah, so I mean, you're going to still do them in this class, the other questions, but in a very limited format. So your main project is going to focus on one of these questions, right? But you're still going to engage with all of the different questions, but not in such a complete way. It will just be very surface level. But I just want you to be familiar and aware.
So we can still address them in the project, but like if you're not to 4 and 5, talk to that or what?
Yeah, just talk about it. Just be cursory analysis suggests, something like that.
In your day-to-day work, you do like all program evaluation. Isn't that kind of the main focus of your position?
Not necessarily. I do a lot of stuff. So but a lot of what I do is efficiency assessments.
Okay.
And I'm going to show you at the end of my presentation today a needs assessment that I'm actually doing like at this very moment,
Okay.
or at least I made up a Gantt that I'm trying to pitch to my bosses to get them on board with some scheme I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just to show you that like these everyday things that we're doing can be melded with this. I wouldn't say, like, if you went and talked to my bosses and said, so Chris is a program evaluator, they'd be like, what? Right? Because they
No,
don't.
that's fine.
Right.
I guess more specifically, my question then, for the kind of proposal that we just submitted, and again, I'm using this as an example. I don't really care that much about our score, although we may have been one of the lower scores. Anyway. No, but my point is that something that you do intuitively, or is it something that you consistently have, for this assessment that I'm going to do, I have a proposal written out where I'm considering the big picture questions, and I know that's something you want us to implement day to day, but is that something that you actually do, or is it just something intuitively that you've done it enough that you don't even like really have to write it out or propose it to anyone, or it's just something that you're asking us to do because you want us to think about it?
Yeah, so in my work, like the projects that I've worked on over the past couple of months, the way I've been doing it is creating PowerPoint presentations that are basically my research proposals to my bosses, right? And then, yeah, most of the time they don't, but but they're on board usually because they see that I've been very purposeful and thoughtful about what I'm doing, and they have a lot of questions because they just don't understand the nature of research. But that's.
I think what people are trying to get at is that we all know that work in real life is ambiguous and complicated and just kind of out there, and there's really no one way to do it, and that's what you've said throughout the class. But at the same time, we'd like to have some framework where we can bounce around and find our way through that ambiguity. Like, for instance, having an example of what you're looking for, not what you're looking for a grade, but something that you would do in real life to figure this out. We could then take our stuff and stick it into that same kind of a structure to find our way through it. I mean, that would be really, really helpful. And I mean, really, to be honest, I think fewer of us are really concerned about the amount of points that we're getting, and are more concerned about them getting back to work with us.
I would say just like take this right here. This is your bread and butter. Like just like put it on a pillow and cuddle with it.
Tattoo that on my
This is what you need to really understand. Like this right here. If you get this, you get the class.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
This is it. Okay. So just and if you look at all of the slides, it's constantly referring back to this concept, like repeatedly. So, okay, on to question number 6.
So I'm
going to take a risk here and step out. I like the big high level part of this, but when I have to drill down and ask meaningful questions about, do I need this program? I don't really know where to start to ask the right type of questions in that box. I know you've given some examples, but so far it's not clicking for me. It's not intuitive enough that I could look at that and say, okay, answer this, and this. When you walk us through it, it makes perfect sense. But for me to go outside of this class and go down through this, it's not there yet.
Well, it's a matter of practice, right? Like that's why we're doing this, and that's why I did the research proposal in 2 phases, because I wanted to give you time to sort of think through it and have some space to fail. Because I think failing it's okay, like, and it's part of learning. And that's why I'm so willing to give extra credit if you adjust, because I want to reward that as opposed to, you failing because initially, because that shouldn't be an expectation.
I know I'm annoying.
2.5.
Yeah. Did you give a 10? Somebody get a 10?
Yes.
Could we have used that one and just walk through it? And you could say, this is why I liked this one. This is how they did a good job of highlighting this piece, and this piece and this is what I was looking for. Giving us something of a rubric to then go back and say, okay, I see where we're now missing these pieces, so that we could get that.
I will email them and ask them.
Great.
Just take their names off and send it.
And,
To just volunteer that they did wonderfully, and
Mess up, you're here.
I mean, I'm not gonna look at you, but you can.
yeah, Gabe.
You can do it if you
It
want.
was not me.
Okay, so let's just move on. But I'll email them, and
Okay,
then
thanks.
I will break it down if they're okay with it. I will break down why they did well, what I liked about it. Okay, and then you'll have a very specific example.
Sure, we got into spectator running tonight.
So, theory of the day. Yeah. Okay, so I've talked about this before, but it's this idea of interpretivism. And I want to just go back to it because much of what we do is based in a positivist world. So what positivism is saying is that we can see the world and look at it objectively and assess it objectively. And what interpretivism argues is that that's not necessarily true. So if you look at it from an ontological point of view, so I talked about ontology last time in our theory of the day, and that's what's the connection between the world and your mind? So is your mind a filter through which everything comes? Or is your mind, can you look at something and separate it from yourself and see it as it really is? Sorry?
My mind is gone.
So,
Discernment. It's just like discernment, like can you discern like
so you have 2 concepts. One is mind-world monism, and the other one is mind-world dualism. So mind-world monism is that you and everything you see, like your perception of the world is a product of who you are. So your world is going to be different than my world, and everybody else's world in this room is going to be completely different. So I gave the example in the first class of this tribe of people who only had words for 1, 2, 3, and 4, and everything past that number. And so if they saw 6 or 1,000 pieces of fruit, it was the same to them. They perceived it as the same. And it's like, there's some colors in Russian that exist. Like there's words for colors in Russian that don't exist. And so people in Russia see colors differently potentially than we do, right?
Correct. I heard that, in Alaska, they have, I don't know, the different
Words for ice.
words for ice and snow.
Exactly, same concept, exactly, right? But that's sort of a way of thinking about it. And what I'm saying is that, or at least from the interpretivist view, is that everything is like that. So for example, I said, if I'm a woman, or if I'm a man, can I truly understand what it's like to be a woman? Like, can I go out and do research? Yeah, but don't we do this all the time? Like, don't we administer surveys? Like, every day I go into meetings, and basically everybody in that meeting is white and male. For a whole random list of different kinds of people. And even within being white and male, there's all these other categories, like they were educated, where they were all these different things that contribute to who we are as people and determine how we are reality, right? So that's sort of the idea of interpretivism. So a lot of interpretivist research is going to involve people and having their words in the research. So like from the perspective of program evaluation, you would do something that was maybe a bit more qualitative, and you're going to have a lot of interviews and quotes in your document, as opposed to just a more positivist view, which might just have a bunch of numbers in there and might always try to quantify people. Like, but the reality is, like, we exist in these sort of extremes, and it's hard to really pin down what the average person is, and when we quantify things like that, so you often see this, like the normal distribution, right? So this is your normal person that exists. But does that really exist? And so interpretivism is saying, no, that doesn't exist. I'm going to mute it. Oh, that's what I forgot. I was going to show you some Parks and Rec stuff, but another time. I didn't prepare it because there's like all kinds of like inappropriate things in there. And I know, so I was just going to be like, at this point, stop.
Ours much worse. I probably said worse.
We're thinking worse now.
Next time, I promise. So yeah, just think about that. Like, so much of our world is quantitative. If you look since the 1950s and 1960s, when computers started to become accessible, that's when you really see a lot of people running regressions and doing a lot of quantitative analysis. I don't know. Is that the best way? It's something you need to ask yourself. You need to ask if it's reliable, and that's something I've talked about a lot. Are surveys reliable? Potentially. Are most of the surveys that are administered reliable? Probably not, right? And is it worth the money to hold a survey? And sort of consider your motivations for holding a survey. Are you really doing it because you want to understand the public? Or are you doing it because you want to convince somebody? Is it just a token effort? Are you just checking the box? And I think that's often what's happening in government. Hey. It's dead. Okay. Well, good luck, groups. I don't know. It's like some sort of, I think it's some shade of gray or blue. Speak Russian. Speak Russian. Out there. Okay, so your needs analysis or assessment, right? That's where you're defining your problem. So like that's huge. So many of us don't define our problem before we really try to understand the situation. So the people who are doing the design thinking today, right? It's like a core element of what we're doing. So how many of you have ever created a program and you didn't do any research beforehand? You just created it. Like maybe you sat around and you sort of like guessed at what people are thinking. Huh? I know most of it. What did you say?
Nothing.
I'm letting you out early today.
When you said it's called staff.
Yeah. Okay. And so whenever that happens, I'm always like, let's go talk to people. And that's what you're doing for your needs assessment, is you're trying to really understand what the problem is. Because if there's a problem, then there's a need for the program, right?
I have a pretty good example. We have within our operations for facilities and construction, that kind of works behind the scenes. And they kind of work on standards, just documents standards that go out to our vendors, or this is how it will be used, right? How we did, how we designed things, right? And a lot of times, like in the past, I'll just say, in the past, that process was the staff group would just do it, through engineers and stuff. And we wouldn't reach out to people in the field that's actually giving this stuff out or having to work with the results or whatever. And there's a huge conflict of what we needed versus what was being created. And so I think that's a good example of what you talk about.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was put in charge of this, and I was not happy about it because I didn't want to be doing that. But I was like, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is, and like, I'm gonna do promotion for this party. Not really, but but sort of. So we were sitting in a meeting and my bosses were like giving me all kinds of ideas and I was like, those are great. And so I came up with this idea of blindfolding employees because the whole point of the party is to promote health and wellness. And I'm like, so you blindfold them and then give them like a taste testing things like unhealthy food and healthy food and see if they can tell the difference. And like all of my bosses were like, oh, that's such a cool idea. And then I actually go out and talk to people in this is public works. I go out and talk to people and most of them are like, that's weird. I'm not going to do that. Right? So, and I thought it was a great idea too, but like when I actually went and talked to people, it wasn't. And I think in all aspects of our work, we could be much better off by just talking to people more, right? And understanding the problem and people's needs and what's going to meet their needs.
Sometimes that's based on their, well, I'm gonna say ignorance level, but I'll go education level of the problem.
So
We just did, where I work, we just did a major restructuring of our salary structure. And everybody's upset about it, but in reality, nothing changed. You went from one number to another.
yeah, and that's an important point because there's this idea of attitudes versus actions. So a lot of people, there's this growing movement, especially in sort of like UX, the user research and kind of the stuff I had you do the other day where so much of the research we do has to do with people's attitudes, whereas often we should be concerned with people's actions. Because attitudes and actions aren't always the same. So oftentimes what people say they're going to do is different than what they do. So it can be very beneficial to observe people actually engaging with something. So for example, I had you guys look at each other using a website. Because that's important because you're actually seeing how some site as opposed to how you think they're going to use it. So for example, how you can do it, a test is basically hold my little game thing at the party and see if people actually use it, right? I mean, it's a party, so I'm not gonna like run experiments there, but right? And that would tell me for future parties, I guess, whether this is a good thing to do.
So just to follow up on that and to help to talk about your point there. So the salary structure came out and everyone was like, this is BS, I'm quitting. Nobody quit.
Yeah.
So that was just an attitude.
Exactly.
Really, this is BS, I'm gonna quit.
Yeah.
Nobody quit. But
also there's the point that perception is often just as important as reality, right? Because if people perceive things being a certain way, then you have to sort of meet people where they are
and methods, methodologies to apply to it, and to use it to make your process more efficient. And do that continually through your whole career, basically.
Yeah, and that's why I'm always giving you like these stupid stories about me doing research for a party, because I'm trying to show you like that you can internalize it and you can use it. Like you can always be using these methods. It doesn't have to be an actual research project. Like you can use it to make your work party better, right? Instead of just sitting in a room guessing. That's all research is. It's just helping you make stuff better, right? At the end of the day, that's all it is. We don't, I mean, some people, I guess, do research for the sake of research, but we're always doing research to better understand something. Right.
I have a question about starting these presentations.
Okay.
There are 70 minutes left in class.
Yeah, I know.
12 minutes. 5.
Yeah, we're gonna have to really, if we run out of time, we'll do it next time, and I'll make a really short presentation. But I'll really make a short presentation. But I blame it on your 7 questions at the beginning. I'm just kidding. I can blame you. Yeah. Okay. So let's go take a break, and then come back. And after class, if you have questions, I'm just gonna sit in a chair somewhere. I'll just wait there. Okay.
Tough crowd. Did I try? Look at her side. Try to kind of bring it back.
Yeah, he suggested this. They've been doing this for the last.
Thanks, Gary.
I'm
just trying to
Agreed.
understandable application to kind of what we do. And where it's a logic model, it's inherently logical in the sense of how it works. So I'm just going to present and talk a little bit about how it applies to you and how you can use that, kind of just a basic model. And then Logan's going to go through kind of just some examples of what I'm talking about. So there's 4 main elements. You have your resources, your activities, your outputs, and your outcomes. And I was thinking about this in like a spiritual context where there is no vision, the people perish. And so I would imagine if you've ever got to the end of perhaps a program that didn't work so well, this is hopefully used to be able to look out and have a vision of what could happen, and then have an application at the start. So as you're planning and going through it, you're successful in your program. So a basic logic model outlines those 4 elements. The first thing is resources. Those are your inputs. What do you have? What's available at your disposal? A lot of those things include human capital, financial resources, materials, and technical skills. Move to your activities. The activities are what you're going to do with those resources that you have at your disposal. So the focus there is on what you actually do. And then you have your outputs. So those are your deliverable units. The example is if I want to make some shoes, my resources are the materials that go into building the shoes. The activities is actually making the shoe. And then the outputs are the number of shoes that are produced. And then the outcomes is how is that shoe going to affect whoever is the end user of that shoe. So I like outcomes in the sense that it answers the question of what difference did my program make, or what difference does my program make? So it's a way that you can logically walk through all these steps. Another way to look at it too is by small and simple things, great things are brought to pass. And you don't have to start at the first with resources. You can start with the question and work backwards. I like that it's flexible and moves that way to help you be able to design your programs.
So a couple of simple examples of how this system works. Maybe. Okay, so an everyday example. I have a headache. My resources are, I have ibuprofen. So the activity, I'm going to take it. The outcome, the pain will go away, which means the output is the pain goes away. So the outcome is that I'm going to feel better. Getting slightly more complex, I feel hungry. I have several things, bread, peanut butter, jelly. I have a mix of resources that I might use. My activities might be combining those things, then eating the food. So I'm not going to be hungry anymore. Therefore, this one's a little different. As opposed to producing a product, this is maybe an effect or a change that I recognize as an issue. I need to build better family unity. Maybe I recognize that I have this group of resources, a budget, a car, camping equipment. So we can go and we can go to the park, we can cook together, play together, be away from all of our devices together. We're going to have that time together as a family. We're actually going to have conversations. Those would be the outputs, and then the outcome hopefully would be, increasing our family bonds, strengthening our family bonds. So kind of a simple walkthrough of how you would put these together. If I have this, then I can do this. If I have that, then this will happen. And if that happens, hopefully this outcome is created. Once you have those 4 basic steps, what it actually looks like in practice can be varied. We saw as we were looking through this, lots of different ways that an actual logic model could be structured. This is just some samples. Some people will break down the categories. So maybe they'll have short, medium, and long-term outcomes that they're measuring. Some of the logic model systems we saw that would continue and kind of feed itself. But these were all built on those basic elements. We have a couple of examples that we want to pull from. We found it was a diabetes training that someone put together the logic model for, trying to figure out what they had available, what they were going to do, and the outcomes. 2 things we want to point out on this particular example. This one did use that kind of the short-term, medium-term, long-term outcomes or impacts, which we saw a lot of people do break it down that way. It says the learning, action, and conditions. In a lot of the samples we saw where people would use this breakdown for the outcomes, the short term was about what are people kind of immediately learning or taking away. The medium was what actions or what were they going to do because of that learning. And then the long term would be what's the long-term condition that was created because of what you did. The other thing we wanted to highlight on this particular example was, again, this box down here where it talks about assumptions. When you do logic modeling, it's all going to be based on certain assumptions that you're going to have to make. Are your if-then statements accurate? Is the value of certain things you have accurate? To communicate a logic model, it is not uncommon that you'll see you want to make sure that you clarify what your assumptions were so that others who are reading your model can know where you were coming from originally. Another sample that we just want to show, this was just kind of an example of how a logic model can be more than just a single focus process, like taking ibuprofen to get rid of your headache. This is a statewide level model where there might be one part of the state organization that's going to deal with this whole chain of things. And another organization in the state might deal with this whole chain of things. And a third organization might be dealing with this whole chain of things, but at a statewide level, it's all working toward the long-term outcome that they were hoping to receive. So these can be a grand scale, they can do multiple processes at once, focus down to certain things. Will have limitations that can exist, but there's also some great advantages. That's what Brad's going to take from here.
So I had a whole page of notes on talking about clarity and the conversations that you could have and convincing other people, but I think we really want to focus on what it does to answer the big questions. Today it's something new, and I've been thinking about it since he brought it up. Where would we use logic models when it comes to program evaluation, specifically in what step? I believe that you're going to see these in impact and answering questions where numbers and raw data are not specifically present. So you're going to see that you're going to see it in meaningful data. That's what you're looking for, is meaningful answers to the questions. For example, you ask yourself about efficiency and you talk about whether things have gotten better or worse, and you're able to see it over a dollar amount. Has things gotten cheaper? Has things gotten more expensive? Where do we fall on that? That's really easy to answer. You're going to ask the if and then statements that don't necessarily have a specific end. So one of the limitations that you're going to worry about is can it be verifiable? Is it something that I can really specifically see? What you're going to do is you're going to represent the best intentions. This is the most likely outcome. You want to go through all of your assumptions to be able to do that. And so you have to avoid what's called the slippery slope kind of argument. You want to avoid these, well, if, for example, if you do drugs, you're going to lose your house kind of thing. And what you do is you see that and you go, when you see that, you go, does that mean necessarily I do drugs, I'm going to lose my house? There's a lot of little steps that go involved that are in there that are part of your outcomes and your outputs that you need to be able to take care of. You also need to be hyper focused on without using your model and staying to your model too focused. The reason is because if you're focused on the outcomes and you ignore your activities and you ignore your inputs, you're going to actually slip and miss those assumptions, your tunnel vision. Some things you got to be really worried about is that logic models are time consuming. So if you're going to use your program and you're going to evaluate your program through logic modeling, it's going to be a very time intensive model. However, once you have it, it should be very flexible. You should be able to make certain assumptions and changes. This didn't work. It's not getting the outcome we want. So let's look at that activity and those resources and see if we're getting the outcome that we desire. Most of the models have lines also. You really want to be specific on the arrows and make sure that you're following the arrows inside of the model. Are there any questions? It got quiet all of a sudden. Nobody has any questions. Teacher has one question.
What other ways might you use the logic model?
Well, you can use it at any point you're looking for. You brought up a really interesting question. I wish I had another day to go over what the logic models were for in that big questions. It was something that clicked in my brain. But I did see it that could be used at any one of those steps, specifically answering questions that didn't have hard and fast answers. If you make 50 pizzas, what is the outcome? You can see that, but you're asking questions like, if I have this much dough and this much cheese and this much this, you know, is it possible? And then you can sort out, I can make 50 small, 40 large. So it's varied. I can see it in any one of the big picture questions. Good.
Well, just going back to that 4-part scheme, whatever.
Questions. Which one did you ask?
I was wondering if you go back to that, not the matrix, but that one. Oh wait, no.
I think we're both working at the same time.
Probably the one before that.
The one before.
That one, yeah. I mean, this to me, this looks pretty fascinating. It looks like you could probably use this just about on any kind of. Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea. It's so broad and it's so flexible. Looks like you could almost use it for just about anything.
But also remember that the limitation is that even if you have these inputs and even if you have these outputs from these inputs, are these the outcomes? You have to be very hyper-focused on your assumptions and your external factors that are going to concern you. And then
we found that these are very good whenever you're trying to measure how efficiently you're doing a process. We didn't see anything that really showed us this being a particularly useful tool if you're trying to measure, are you doing the best things out of several things or something like that. This is good for, am I doing this process the best it can be done?
It helps you to be able to see your whole flow and how things should flow and how things questions. You're questioning, is this really going to work? And you're testing that assumption.
you also missed.
What you just said, that's money right there.
Say it again.
You're making sure that your question is being answered at the end. You're questioning the assumptions. And if you follow it logically, you'll be able to see before you put any kind of mega resources or a lot of money. This is a good way to start. And there's applications like you're saying, John, are just like you could do anything. You could do this in the church setting, school, with your family. We tried to show that. Super simple to really, really complex.
Problem, it doesn't really help solve ethical questions. You have some real failures when it tries to solve an ethical question. And sometimes that's, you know, that's part of the impact. Am I doing what I want ethically? And it misses it. So that was a big limitation.
Oh, one more question.
Joe?
Can you go back to the peanut butter? So,
Hunger.
and maybe you guys already answered this, but so with the logic model, do you always are you always like shooting for a specific outcome? And the reason I'm asking that is what happens when I was thinking, okay, well, if you eat a lot of peanut butter and jelly, maybe you're not getting that you need, even though you're not. Like there's going to be multiple outcomes, right? So should you always like focus on that outcome or let the outcomes come to you, the multiple outcomes that might come?
If I could answer that, I'll give it a try. The way I understood it in the reading is that you start out with the question, like he was talking earlier, what's your need? What is the problem? What is it you're addressing is the first step. And the next step is, what do you want to happen?
So you do want to have
And then you have to
outcome.
say, and this is how the problem would be better. And these are the resources that I have or that I need. And then from that, you just keep building step by step to hopefully see if your assumptions and processes will get you where your original problem was.
But you can also start backwards and reverse plan. So you can start with the outcomes and then question that, what's it going to take to be able to get to that outcome and work backwards. So it's really flexible.
That also, though, that's one of the cautions about using this is if you try and map every single thing that's possible, you're going to get so locked into and bogged down into all the what ifs that you become a model instead of the model being a tool for you. So eventually, that's where it talks about the Goldilocks principle that we've talked about. You just kind of, generally speaking, this is kind of what this is the resources I've got. Don't plan on your highest. Plan on your lowest, you plan on kind of where you fit in the middle. The activities you're going to do, well, we've generally been able to do this, and this. Give us this output, which should give us that. You know, you don't plan it on your extremes, and you try and you have to recognize that it's simply not reality.
So, giddy up.
points for the presentation, 10 points for the handout that you create, right? So just as a benchmark, I guess that was really good.
Next week. Handouts next week.
So, you good? Our team walk, Giddy Up, Scary, Walkwist, Dave Steinquist, and Michael Williams, our all-star team. So this evening we're going to talk a little bit about focus groups, a basic overview, talk about process, history, things of that nature. But to get started, we wanted to definitely model something that we found as a very effective focus group, base a lot of our overview on that. So, let's do that up for me. We've got a
Okay, so which one tasted better?
Steve. Yeah, the guy. With Lisa, I only tasted peanut butter and chocolate.
Lisa had just eaten a peanut butter cup.
But with Steve, I tasted something more. It was peanut butter and Snickers.
You're right.
Yeah.
Steve had just eaten Snickers peanut butter squares.
Steve was delicious. Yeah. I'll have another taste.
Oh, certainly.
Eat both squares, please.
If you like peanut butter and chocolate, you'll love peanut butter and Snickers. Try new Snickers peanut butter square.
Okay, so modeled an excellent group works and is efficient. As an overview, what we want to talk about first are some of the things that focus groups aren't. And primarily, focus groups aren't just an unstructured sit down of people just discussing how they feel, this, that, and the other. As shown here with the sharks, they were definitely guided in specific directions and given an opportunity to kind of share their feedback, but everything was planned with a purpose prior to them talking. Focus groups also aren't necessarily a perfect representation of the population. Keeping in mind when we get a focus group, sometimes it's in the initial phases of a program or a project, or we're evaluating individuals in a program or a project. And so it's not necessarily the general population that we're representing there. We're obviously selecting individuals or individuals that volunteered. In that light, it's not necessarily perfect for modeling what a population might feel like. However, focus groups do provide insights on how individuals think about specific projects and ideas. Understanding study programs and phenomena. Again, you can kind of delve into people's reactions and thoughts and how they feel and perceive things. Groups are an ideal way in that sense to gather qualitative data about specific program questions that you may have. One of the things that we looked at specifically talked about, how effective is this program that had already been through. And so having a focus group and having their feedback kind of provides ample understanding for what needs to go going forward with that program. And then in a sense, they're group interviews because you've pulled people together, you've structured them, and you've created questions, but they're a lot more economical front half of your research because you're not spending all the time and resources to sit down one-on-one and interview all these individuals. And so it's a little bit quicker and a little bit cheaper to do that. What we'll do, we're going to talk a little bit more about the history, talk a little bit about the application process. and then close it out with talking just about the general process of how focus groups are applied. So.
I figured we'd just give you the 10,000-foot, 20-second historical overview of focus groups. So it started out in we kind of got the roots going at Princeton. Eventually, program kind of moved to Columbia. So that's when you go. Robert Merton is kind of who they kind of give some credit to as far as being the father of the focus group interviews. So that's kind of just to give you a little bit of idea, kind of where it came from, the time frame and whatnot. So why focus groups? We talked about this a little bit earlier tonight. Main purpose to provide data to enhance, change, or create a product or service. Kind of the numbers, 7 to 10, kind of a good number. Unfamiliar with each other, selected because they have certain characteristics, perhaps like the dog park example. Maybe people that own dogs versus our cat friends. Although that might be fun too. Primary uses: investigate complex behavior, discover how different groups think and feel about a topic, identify changes, verify or clarify results from surveys, kind of as Gary talked about, drilling down a little bit more. Solutions to problems, informed decision making, or even just deepen understanding or further expound and learn more about the statistical data that you've already gathered. So focus groups, some of the advantages: personal feelings, perceptions, opinions. Get those direct, group answers. They can save time, I already mentioned. Provide a broader range of information than just maybe your survey data has presented to you. Maybe clarification and provide useful material to put on the back of your candy bars to tell people why they should buy them. Disadvantages, potential disadvantages: disagreements. Might end up with fisticuffs with people. Hard to control, manage, tricky to analyze. Might be a little subjective, certainly, to listen to somebody's answer and try to get that into a category. Can be difficult to encourage. You have different people. Some of us love to talk, and others of us like to listen. So it's tricky. And finally, self-selecting. There may be people that just like, I'm not going to be a part of that, or I'm not interested in something like that, and you miss out on those opinions and those answers. So Dave will tell us a little bit about the application.
Okay, so before I go into it, does anybody have any ideas of when, you might use this in a day-to-day setting?
The user experience and product testing.
Product testing, user experience. Anybody else?
Use, predicting whether something's going to be useful or not, or whether programs going to be.
Can do that. So those are all things that in our research we have found. So one of the things that they use is a tier program approach. And so there's 3 parts to this tier. So the program definition. So we use this when assessing community needs or other programs. And so for an example, an after-school program or any program that you're wanting to start with a focus group to determine the needs of who your intended audience is. Accountability. So after it's started, you can ask the existing participants, what's going well, how can we improve this? Step, you'll be able to see, if it's going anywhere or if it's worth your time and resources to continue in the process. And then the third dot, after you've gone for a little while and you want to get other input, you can ask people that did not participate in the group, those that or whatever, you can ask them improvements, why they aren't coming, things that you can do to change to get their participation. Another thing that was brought up was for new products coming in. So focus groups are important for getting feedback on in the early stages, as Mike talked about. And then also to get the attitudes, feelings, beliefs, experiences, and reactions that other methods wouldn't get. So
focus groups, you have this group of people that, like Michael said, some of them are going to talk, some of them aren't. I think the biggest part is to be open-minded on that. And then Angela's going to talk a little bit more about the whole process.
Okay, so this kind of gives you a diagram of the process. And hopefully you've started out by defining your purpose, created a timeline, and identified who your participants are going to be. You're going to create really good questions, and this is key, group to keep it organized and on point, and then administer the focus group, and then you'll set and establish time and discussion questions and all of that, the tone as you're going through and administering, and then taking notes, the video stuff, and I'm going to talk about these a little bit more in detail. You'll review and then you report your findings. So it's just kind of a process that you go through. The first thing is your preparation. You've got to arrange your logistical piece of it. And once you've figured out who your participants are and your questions, you need to figure out what is the best time for these participants. Location is key. Is this going to be something where you're going to need tables and chairs? So you want to make sure that that room is the best place for the type of focus group that you want to run. So you want to pick a good location. Another thing that we do often is incentive food. Focus groups we run with students, we get pizza because that gets them there. They're starving students, so obviously they want to come and eat, and then they'll focus on what you're going to ask them about. Also, time is a big issue here, so food might help because people might be spending long periods of time. The video that our professor put up for us to look at, that was a focus group, was several hours. And so if people are there putting their time in, it's a good idea to have something to reward them or to let them know that this is important. Travel, etc., parking, you want to make sure that they understand where they're going and how to get there, where to park, and make sure that that's taken care of and make it as convenient for them as well. Materials that you might want to think about when you're conducting one of these would be a release form. Depending on your topic that you're covering, you want to make sure that everyone's comfortable in the room if you were going to be sharing the information that's coming out of that focus group. So that's one of the things that you might want to think about, putting into a packet for everybody to have to sign. Also, sometimes it's good for them to have a piece of paper, pen, things in front of them, maybe it's written out, and you're going to kind of set the tone for that. That's the next thing I would. Setting the tone. It's important that you're giving them the ground rules when you start your focus group. You go through your introductions, you tell them what the process is going to be, kind of set those ground rules, let them know that timed answers are going to be important. A lot of times it's good to have two people in the room. You have somebody that's the facilitator, but you also have somebody that might be working with video equipment or whatever. So as you're going through each question, they can't just run amok. You can get them staying focused and getting to the next person to get their answers. And then they're videoing and recording. Make sure that where you're placing these items is crucial, because if you don't have microphones in the right places, if you have a very large group, you're not going to capture all of the information that you'll need to evaluate and analyze. Then the wrap up. This is where you take all of that information, everything that you've recorded or videoed or gathered in notes, whatever it is, however you're doing that, you're going to sit down and you're going to evaluate that and analyze it. And then you're going to compile it into a report. And at some point, you're going to be, and so you want to make sure, I think our professor talked about it, if you're going to do multiple focus groups, maybe there is a way to code it or whatever, make it very clear in your report, every step that you made, and your answers are clear, and there's a clear understanding to what your outcomes are based on that. So, and sometimes if you do multiple, you can get more feedback that way too. Okay. Questions?
We've got a handout, we'll go ahead and pass it around. Should be enough for everybody. meaning somebody that's too knowledgeable about something coming into the group, or
Well, he said there's a self-selection problem possibly where somebody, you're going to get certain types of people self-selecting into your focus group, other people might not want to participate, such as
It's a lot. I would assume you need to kind of keep a, kind of know, who you've got in your focus group and another, or is that, I was thinking about it earlier when we were talking about that, or even the questions that were brought up earlier about, getting led down one path versus another, versus these 7 people versus these 7 people. Really watch the line of what type of people you have, because I'm sure there are probably people that try to load those, like anything else.
So oftentimes you're selecting, you're very purposeful in who you're selecting, and one way to deal with it is to pay people a reasonable amount. So a lot of the focus groups I've ran at paid for like $75 per person for like 2 hours. For example, students are more prone to participate, or people who don't have a whole lot of money when you pay them. Anybody else?
One of the things I would see being a problem with this, I don't know if you came across this, is like having a truthful, how they're going to build focus group, like a group kind of leading people down the path that may not be true healing. With that,
I don't think it's conducive to group think mentality, but again, in a focus group, I think it's a supplement to some of the other methods that you could use. And it's an opportunity to at least kind of weed out some things, but also to bring up some good points. It could be used as a precursor to interviews or to some other method. But it's also important to realize that as a facilitator of a focus group, like you can kind of steer the questions in the right direction, but you can't necessarily control what the individuals are saying. And so, it's kind of a give and take thing in the sense that I'm probably not answering your question very well, but I think you use the method to kind of supplement other methods, and kind of either you're looking at it from the beginning or looking after you've already collected some data, or you kind of towards the end, and so it's inclusive of others.
I think in addition to that, a moderator can kind of make it a safer environment. Saying, I participated in one this week at work, and he essentially said what happens in this room stays in this room. And so he kind of led it to, you don't have to share what's said in this room. So largely part of the moderators.
Just to support, that's why a moderator is crucial to a focus group, because they have to be able to, I've seen focus groups, because I've been the one behind the window, that where someone will try to dominate, steer it in one, and that's where the moderators keep it, not shut them down, but redirect them and focus them back to where they need to be. And if they don't want to go there, they will move on, and that's how they go. So that's one way to manage that. And it's conversely, those who want to participate in the focus group and then don't say anything. So that moderator then has to draw that information from that person who wants to be silent. So really a successful focus group is planning and that moderation.
Setting the groundwork. Yep. When you get started, letting them know there is a time limit on your answers. And this is kind of the function, this is how we're going to operate, so that people are clear up front what you expect, how you expect the process to go. Is helpful.
Other questions? Yeah.
Not so much a question, comment, but I think in addition to the moderator, the assistant plays an equally important role. Being an assistant moderator, because that helps the moderator become.
Yeah, I agree. The whole idea is that you're controlling the environment as much as possible.
But they're like doing the recording and
right.
the taking and the logistics, so he can really partially give their attention.
Any questions?
So how many do we have next week?
All of them, everybody else.
Are we doing all next week or are we doing in the next 2 weeks?
We'll probably just start the class.
So we're definitely doing all the rest of them next week.
So those were both really good. So
Just do what they did.
yeah, just do what they did. I mean, they covered the content, right?
Yeah.
So without saying they're getting a 10, they're getting a 10.
Exactly.
So the reason I was asking is he's going to be out next week, so we were wondering if we were going to run over anyway. Like, could we do the following week?
Well,
But
I mean, I'm not gonna rate him lower because he's not here.